Perhaps we can get started. I'd like to welcome everyone here. Thank you very much for coming out, particularly when rather cold evening. They're still with us. Someone down here just said, well, it's because American Idol's not here. It's probably have some things. I thought if that were the case, we should have packed the chapel here. So that's okay. This is our third in our series this year of presentations on the mission and vision of our school. And it really seemed to me back in the summer that it would be very good to have this particular type of presentation. Because I think if we are serious about looking at the mission and vision of our school, women are a significant group in that mission and vision, and quite frankly, that has not always been the case, and not just at our school, in so many places. I can be very careful saying that because you all know that. I can't help by the way, but I guess it seems like Brian Moore joined us very much CPO. No offense, I mean, all guys, no offense, Mr. There's always one in the crowd, but you notice, I gave myself. CYO ladies, Kathy, Mr. Stewart and Father Joe would remember, they have the age here. Kathy, everybody on the side, that sort of thing. I think, and I know this, I guess, from my own personal experience, beginning in 1970, when prior to that, I think Mr. Stewart had talked about this briefly, we had a couple of women here, literally two, to where we are now. And not just in terms of what women are to Lakefield, what they've given and done, but I think in a way perhaps how Lakefield has helped hold them. Again, I thought that would prove to be a rather interesting evening. When I suggested this to the ladies, and at first there was some hesitation, but after a few moments of talking together, they said, I think we could go with this. You can leave now. They've had several meetings since we started this, to which I've been invited to come. I was told the hope was this was going to be a conversational meeting. So I'm looking forward to that. I hope you are too. Thank you for being here. Let me very quickly introduce the ladies to you. I think most of you know who they are. My immediate left, Mrs. Sheila Brune, who's the administrative assistant to Mr. Stewart in his office. Mrs. Fran Finnegan, who's the director of our Murray Learning Services program. Mrs. Mathias, director of guidance. Mrs. Kathy Roeder, who is the administrative assistant in the upper school office. And last but not least, Mrs. Beth Ann Schuller, who is a member of our science department and one of our coaches as well. So with that as an introduction, I think I'm going to turn things over at this point to Mrs. Finnegan.
I'm going to move up just a little bit in hopes of being able to avoid the dreaded microphone. And the other half of that is, we did talk about this, hoping to evolve into a dialogue. We're going to talk a little bit, and then we're going to hope to draw you in for some of your opinions and thoughts on things. So if you wouldn't mind, would you come to the front of the church, please, ladies? If you wouldn't mind, please come and maybe pull some chairs around, whatever, so that we can get to the point where we can talk with one another. That would really, I think, enable it to be a more enjoyable talk, certainly for us, and I hope for you.
I'm going up here with you.
John sort of started things off and backtrack a little bit, and I think it's very important to give this a little bit of texture and context. John approached each of us individually with the idea of doing this, and after a really long pause, The response in my head, at any rate, was, I couldn't think of anything much more boring than that. And who would ever want to come out on a February night to hear it? But we started talking about it, I think, in August. And it's easy to agree to anything in August when the actual event is in February. So we all said, sure, because nobody can tell John no. So as a result, we are all here. And our first meeting sort of was an extension of that feeling. We gathered around, sort of looked at each other. We thought about, what are we going to talk about? And we kind of came up dry and drier. And we sort of sat and we tried a few things on. And it was very interesting because an energy started to build that overcame the dread, frankly. And there was a real energy that after we had our first meeting, we had a direction. And the second meeting we had real enthusiasm because it really is an issue that once we sort of worked it and molded it and formed it a bit, we realized is something that is very, very close to our hearts. That there is, when you take it beyond our personal stories, which was where the bulk of the boring came in, and you talked about the big context of women at Loyola, where they've come from and where we are now, it's really a very, very exciting and energizing story to hear. And when we looked at who we were, which I will credit John, I'm sure was his master plot all along, of course it was, we realized that we had an incredible amount of Loyola history. We begin with Sheila Brune, who can take us way back. Now, we're among friends, so I hope you don't. I can't like you. We progressed forward incrementally until we looked at Beth Ann Schuller, who is the most recent addition and who represents a very new, current, and just exciting change to what women on this campus represent. Everybody's going to have a few minutes to tell you a little bit of their own story. And we're actually going to have a guest speaker. Mr. John Stewart is going to take us even farther back in history and set the stage for us. And then we're going to progress through the years with the personalities that you have in front of you. And then what we want to do is, after you hear these stories, hear the experiences, is set out a few questions. Hopefully we're going to get some of your juices flowing. And I'm guessing that once you start thinking in some of the directions that we're probably going to take you, you're going to have some questions, you're going to have some input, and I'm sure through the network that is always Loyola, you'll have some observations. And I think we're going to take it well beyond us, and we're going to feed off of your energy too, if you don't mind. So with that context being said, I'm going to ask Mr. John Stewart if he would share with us his history of women at Loyola.
About 5 minutes, please. I was expecting to see Marjorie's here tonight. I wanted to say hi to her and introduce her, but Carolyn's not here yet. Let me take you back. Well, first off, that old adage, walking next to every great man, there is a great or greater woman, is no more apropos than when Father John Dustin and Father Ferdinand Wheeler back in the late 20s walked along with 3 lovely women. All right? They were the Blake sisters. They were the daughters of George and Harriet Blake. George was a wealthy builder, and George and Harriet Blake passed away, left their fortune to the 3 daughters. One of the daughters passed away, and the other 2 decided to a memorial for their parents. The Jesuits at that time had sold a piece of property down on University Parkway, and they walked away with $165,000 from that sale. And they were looking at that time, Father Dustin was looking at that time for a piece of property way out north because Loyola College had moved to Cold Spring Lane. So he was looking further north on Falls Road and Charles Street for some property. Found some property out here. It was the estate of the governor of Maryland back in 1896. His name was Elihu Jackson. That's his mansion he lived in up there on the hill now, Xavier Hall. But Elihu Jackson sold that property, and then it was sold again. And guess what? Father Wheeler bought this property in 1931 for $135,000. But then he needed some money to build a school. And that's where the Blake sisters came in. Because they pulled their money, they took Father Wheeler to the bank, they gave him $215,000. So he had 30 left over, and they started to build a school. That was 1931 when they purchased the property. The school moved here in 1934. Of course, the mothers' clubs were very active, the ladies in the mothers' club. But there were no women here. No women at Blakefield until 1936, when a diminutive woman named Mary Crean came here as the school's librarian. And Miss Crean was the only lady to work here at Loyola with the boys in an educational vein, except for women who came in. I remember Mary Puller worked here, and we had a succession of wonderful women. Ann Clifford, Mary Puller, Carol Montleone, Presley, Miss Roeder, working in the headmaster's office. And that was pretty much where the ladies worked who came in. But Miss Crean was the only lady who came in as, quote, an educator up until 1969. All right, now first off, I'll tell you a little bit about Miss Crean. Like I said, diminutive, tough as steel. Tough as steel. I mean, I had to deal with the Jesuits for 4 years when I was here, and I didn't want to face Miss Crean too much in the library, you know. So, I mean, she was as tough as the Jesuits. And when I came back here in 1967, I went up to her and I said, "Hi, Miss Crean, my name is John Stewart." She said, "I remember you, John Stewart." I don't know whether that was good or bad, right? But she was here up into the 70s, all right? In 1969, the school was changing. Late 60s, Bob Dylan said it best, the times they were changing. And I can tell you stories about the 70s, but we had our first lady come on as a language teacher. Miss Edwige Carter came in as a language teacher. She returned here a few years ago as a substitute teacher. But since then, there have been ladies who've come in so many different capacities, as teachers, counselors, coaches. We have ladies now, and I'm sure you're going to cover, in department chairs. And we even had, at one point, a few years back, Miss Gail Kujava was the head of school here at Loyola. So there's been a tremendous progression and expansion of the ladies. I think if you count them now, look at yearbooks occasionally, you know, we have at least, I would say 30–40% of the faculty is are ladies. Okay? So it's my pleasure to turn it back over to Miss Finnegan. It's my pleasure to work with these ladies every day as colleagues, especially this lady over here who keeps me straight every day, and it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
And what we're going to do is, as I said, progress through the decades. And we're going to start with Miss Sheila Brune, and then we're going to go to Kathy, then to myself, Kathy, and then to Beth Ann. So we each will present our own little slice of time.
I was hired here in 1983, which was then Loyola High School, as an assistant to the Dean of Students. I was a part-time employee, and at that time my affiliation with Loyola was simply a job. I came in, I did my thing, I recorded attendance, issued late slips, whatever, and that was it. As a staff member, I was never involved with, very seldom involved with faculty, and never invited to participate in anything. You know, it was just, I came and I went, did what I had to do, and I was out of there. Today, at that point, I was one of 18 women on campus. I was the 18th woman on campus. At that time, there were 8 women faculty members, 7 staff, a female treasurer, and a female librarian. Now fast forward to 2009. Today, I'm one of 49 female employees. And these include 27 teachers, 17 staff, a middle school principal, 3 college counselors, director of development, director of Christian service, department head, librarian, and nurse. So we've come a long way since then. As I said in the beginning, I was very uninvolved. And I think the first change in my role as just an administrative assistant or secretary came in 1993 when Father Brad Murray invited me to go on a Kairos retreat as a leader. And I can remember how excited I was, and yet in a way I was very, very apprehensive because I felt really like an outsider. I felt as a staff member and a woman, I was really an outsider, and I was the only woman on that retreat team. And that proved to be, I guess I got my foot in the door then. It was a very positive experience and something from which I learned a lot. About 10 years ago, things really began to change. Females were involved more. Faculty and staff combined and they became more as one rather than a division. And definitely 5 years ago, I think when John Weedenkamp took over that office of Ignatian Identity, Mission and Identity, we've really got to push. And I certainly was the beneficiary of that. I've been invited to be a Eucharistic minister. I've gone on one of the class retreats. I have, what else? I've taken part in the Ignatian Year of Prayer, the Challenge Program, the Spirituality Program. I have actually given a presentation or a reflection at a faculty day of retreat, and this year I was privileged to offer a reflection at the school-wide Mass on the Feast of the Immaculate Conception. I consider this really an honor and a privilege. I've also gone on 2 summer service retreats, so my role has changed dramatically. When I look at my role, what I consider my role here, I guess I figure it's a caregiver. It's a caregiver and a mom away from home to a lot of the boys. I love to interact with the kids, and I think they give me as much as I give them. So to go back to 1983, Loyola was my employer. In 2009, I look at Loyola as a vibrant community of dedicated and committed individuals, both men and women, who work every day to implement and live the Ignatian mission and vision. And I guess in my 26 years here, I would say I once was something in 1983, and in 2009, I'm someone. Thanks.
My name is Mathias, and I'm Director of College Counseling, but I arrived at Loyola in 1985. Basically I was clueless. I had no idea that I came from New England. I was 23 years old. I was brought in to work with Sheila Brune and do college counseling. I had graduated from Amherst College in Massachusetts in 1984 and had done the next year in college admissions. And so my world was very different. I was from New England. I went to a coeducational college. I did admissions in which I was working in a college environment with men and women. So the description of the way Loyola was and the way that Loyola is, I was much more familiar with the way Loyola is now, with the environment that I had been in. So I came in, I was 23 years old, newly married, and when students started calling me Mrs. Mathias, I turned around and looked for my mother-in-law. I hadn't been used to, I'd been married in June and I arrived on campus in August, so I wasn't used to being Mrs. Mathias. Obviously working with Joe, I loved it from the very beginning. And in my work in college admissions, I had enjoyed it, but almost immediately knew that I loved working with the students and, you know, wanted to know more and work more with them. And instead of just a brief, interaction with them and then sending them on their way, I knew almost immediately that I wanted to be on the high school side of things because I really liked working with the students. And so my husband, Jim, had been teaching and coaching here, and he was headed off to law school, and we were getting married, and I was moving down here, and it ended up that Loyola was starting to think about having another college counselor, so it all worked out very well for me. Like I said, I came in, and despite the fact that I'm not Catholic, I wasn't from the area, I felt immediately comfortable and loved it because I was working with students, I was working with the people here. And I guess ignorance is bliss. To me, I was here, I was accepted, you know, it was a great place to work. And I have to tell you, I just had to write, it's a very nerve-wracking thing, I just had to write a sort of an essay, it's almost like your college essay, for my 25th reunion to college, which is happening in May. Talk about, you know, you have to kind of give us, you know, tell you what you've been doing in 25 years of college, and you're with a lot of very bright, ambitious people, and you have to write your essay. I have great sympathy for the boys as they write their college essay. But I found myself, talking and thinking about Loyola because of, you know, what it's done for me and the place that I'm in. And I said in it, I said, you know, I must either be very, not very creative, or just very boring, or just very lucky that I started working in this place and I'm still here. I don't think there are very many classmates of mine who have worked in the same place doing, you know, not always doing the same thing, but worked in the same place for 24 years. So, that tells you something. I guess I started doing, I think that when we were talking, this was so much fun talking with everybody, and when they started doing things. I think I did my first Kairos in, we were trying to figure this out, Father Joe and I went, but I think it was probably 91 maybe, or 92. I was in the first year when women were asked to go on Kairos. Now Kairos was fairly new to Loyola, and so they were getting around to inviting women, just one. There was only one woman allowed on Kairos. I mean, so, it was the most amazing experience and continues to be the most amazing experience to have that opportunity and privilege to be with the students and to work with the students. So that was a big deal. I was involved for the last 10 years or so in peer education, which is another great opportunity to work one-on-one with students, you know, and see what their energy and their desire to serve and to help others. Again, that's what Sheila was talking about. That, you know, you wonder how much Loyola does for you. I mean, just being a part of this place, it is not at all a job. It's much more than a job. I also had the opportunity to do a service trip. I went to New Mexico and this was interesting, this was the first year that they were encouraging young alums to be the group leader. So I was a group leader with a student who had just graduated from College Park, so he and I were the leaders. And I remember the parents saying, "Are you up for this?" I mean, it's just, and he looked so young, it just looked like me and 10 boys, you know, and that's where it was. But they were absolutely wonderful, and again, it was a privilege to do. Service, going on a service trip is like that Kairos experience because you get to see how the boys interact with each other, but how much they truly want to do something and help someone and be a part of something. I began, I took over as director of college counseling in around 2000 when Joe retired. And again, I guess I should have been, you know, thinking, wow, they really want me. But, you know, I've been there so long, I probably didn't have a choice that I was going to be the director. But I guess that's a big deal that Loyola, you know, I'm a woman and it's an all-boys school. But to me, it was, you know, this is just kind of the way it goes. But also when I think about the fact that I've been asked to be on search committees, a couple of times and been a part of the accreditation of the school. But see, again, I think ignorance is bliss. I just, I love the place, I love the students, and Loyola has embraced me, and I've been very lucky, and given wonderful opportunities because of it. Yeah, we'll chip in later. So anyway, that's me since 1980. I'm Fran Finnegan, and I started here at Loyola in '96. My middle son graduated in '96, and we had struck a deal that I had this phenomenal opportunity to come to work at Loyola, but not surprisingly, he didn't exactly see that as a phenomenal opportunity for him. So as long as I agreed not to chaperone any dances and to stay out of the cafeteria until he graduated, he was okay with the arrangement. And it was a unique and wonderful opportunity. I've been in education now for 38 years. And over those 38 years, I have taught every grade from 2-year-old preschool, now all the way through seniors in high school. And it was very new to me in '96, however. I was brought on as part of the startup team for a brand new program at Loyola. It was a learning support program for gifted, learning disabled students. It was a difficult task because it was brand new territory, and it was largely misunderstood. What I did find was concern on the part of the faculty and concern on part of, if truth be told, on the part of many parents about what was this and what was it going to mean to Loyola. And I would have to say that I think that took precedence over whether I was a man or a woman. It was, what is this program? And what I will always remember was a bit of healthy skepticism, but that willingness to wait and see. Okay, we'll wait and see. And everybody had the right mindset towards it. What struck me most was the attitude of any reservations that were held because they wanted the best for the Loyola community. And if they had reservations, it was because they just didn't know. So it was my job to come in and show them the value of this, show them what this was about, prove to them the quality of these students, and that's what happened. The students took over, the students participated in the program, the students interacted in their classroom, and it was the boys who earned the credibility for the program that I believe I was the beneficiary of that. The boys did the groundwork. The teachers got to know them, they got to see them, they got to understand that you can be gifted and still have learning issues. And that has been that benefit of the doubt that I will always appreciate. And if I had to describe my overall experience here at Loyola, it has been embracing, and it has, even when there has been doubt, it's been, we're going to give you the benefit of the doubt. And I was brought on campus, as I said, if I'm honest, there was a little bit of skepticism about what I was doing on campus. But it didn't take long. I was invited onto major committees. I was asked to participate in the Middle States reevaluation, which was right after I got here. And I was supported very much by the administration. And it was that support, again, that I think caused some of the uninformed, they just people that had no experience with what I was doing. That support is what made them stop, watch, wait, and invest eventually. And it was a wonderful opportunity. I had not had a family member attend Loyola. My husband
was not a Loyola grad, my brothers were not Loyola grads, but what I saw was in my male friends, social friends, I would see men that I admired so much. And when we get into conversations and you talk about what was the most important thing and what was the most formative years, it wasn't Georgetown College, this is Baltimore, so it wasn't the college years. They went back and said the most important thing in making me who I am today, for better or worse, they said was my 4 years at Loyola. And I'd ask them, what was it about Loyola that you go back to and say, that was good? Nobody could say what it was. And I was very puzzled by what this thing was that nobody could describe. And when my sons came here, I started to see it. It wasn't anything that happened suddenly or overnight. It was gradual, 4-year process. It snuck up on them. It happened over the course of their time at Loyola, and it was so subtle, you didn't realize it until they were marching down the aisle, what had happened and who they had become. And I very much wanted a part of that. When I came to Loyola, I was so excited that I was going to be a piece of that. We were talking about what we bring to Loyola and what Loyola gave to us. I firmly believe that I have been the beneficiary of far more from this institution than I ever brought to it. The exposure to the caliber of intellects that we get to work with all the time, to be part of a community that is based on love and service. You don't understand what a wonderful thing that is until you get to come to work, and that is your environment. I think what I give back to the boys is they get to see somebody who works very hard, but who loves to come to work every day. And for them to see that on the face of the people that they interact with, the adults that they're working with, I think that is one of those quiet, subtle little messages. And that's one of those sneaky little ways that we influence the boys over the course of 4 years. I remember my son as a freshman coming home and being really surprised. He said, "Mom, the teachers really like us." And he was, if you knew my son, that might not have been as big a stretch for him to say. But it was remarkable for him to think and to sense that his instructors actually liked being with them. It's not true everywhere you go. It just isn't. But it is true here. And I think that is my experience. That's my give-take. I hope that I can bring that to them, that they know that they can go out and look for a career where they'll value that supportive community that's based on love and service. They've seen it. They'll know what they're looking for. When I started college looking for a career, truth be told, most often girls were channeled to either be nurses or teachers. Those were what we called pink-collar jobs. That was way back when. I've got a daughter who's 25. She grew up, and of course the sky's the limit if you're a girl now in this country. So she went on, she had business skills, she spent 4 years in the business community, was very successful, but truth be told, she was miserable. She kept looking at me, frankly, and seeing what I had, and she had a lot of the perks of a good job, but she felt she was missing something. And I couldn't be more excited to tell you that in the last 3 weeks, she actually went to work for a Jesuit high school. She's working at Cristo Rey right now. And she gets it now. She has a share in the good stuff that Loyola has offered to me as an employee. I really don't see myself as a female employee. The good news is we really don't feel that distinction. I feel like one of many good people who work at Loyola, and I think that's the best thing about it. Thank you.
saw in the Catholic Review an ad for a part-time job, and I thought, well, I could make money for something I can do it for free. So I came here, and I did like it. I worked a little more and a little more. And after 5 years, I went to work at College Counseling Academy full-time. And with that, I was invited to participate in John's Ignatian Educator Program, which he was beginning. And that was it, and I was hooked. It really, that changed my life. And it has just so enriched my life. At that time, they were looking for summer service volunteers, and I asked if I could go, and the director at the time said, I never had a staff member go. But they embraced that. I went, and since then, many staff members have gone. I went to work with the boys. The next year, Ken Bedway and Ken is the director of physical staff here. So 2 staff members went. I think it was really a change in the times. 5 years ago, like Sheila said, I think 5 years ago, John's program really changed things. I had the privilege of going on Kairos last year. It's changing, life-changing for the boys. It's also life-changing for us as adults. It really is a privilege. I've spoken at the faculty days of reflection and participated in all of John's programs. I can't believe I work at a place where we're allowed to do that during the school day, participate in these programs, discuss with our colleagues, things like St. Ignatius, and I've learned so much. And my life has been enriched, and I agree we get so much more from the community than we get. One thing I think is kind of interesting as I was reflecting on this is in the decreased number of priests, in an odd way, maybe kind of like in God's way, has really been a blessing. Because I don't think we'd be doing these things if there wasn't a need for lay people to become so involved to keep Loyola and the Jesuit tradition going, all the Jesuit schools. And I'm just grateful to be here. Thank you.
My name is Beth Ann Schuller, and in the series of years, I guess I was hired 2 years ago. I came in 2007. I have been teaching for 6 years previous to that. This is my 8th year teaching, and once I finished my master's degree, I decided that I was ready to pursue something different, and I wanted to teach someplace else. I was fortunate enough because one of my good friends, my very good friend, Miss Erin Warfield, was already working here, and she had been here for 6 years as well. And from day one, she loved it. From day one, we were both hired as teachers at the exact same time, and so we had that experience of being together 6 years and learning how to be a teacher, experiencing what it's like to teach high school. She teaches math, I teach science, and so we get to develop our own pathway together. And from day one, she loved this place. It was a fit for her, and she knew this was the right place to be. So when I was putting my resume together, and I met Mr. Christopher Post, who was the principal at the time, and talked about the possibility of a biology position, and he said there was certainly a possibility. I was very excited that there might be an opportunity for me to come here. And as I was putting together my resume, one thing I recognize now is when you're hired at Loyola, the important thing is not to show what a great background you have in your subject. All of us are extremely well educated and have tremendous credentials in our backgrounds, whether it's math or science or history or English. Really, what's important to make yourself a standout candidate is how are you going to be involved in the community? What are you going to add to Loyola Blakefield that some other candidate wouldn't? Are you going to be a warm body that's going to show up in the classroom and teach biology? There are certainly plenty of people in Baltimore County that can do that. I was just one of many. And what makes all of us unique here at Loyola Blakefield, man or woman, is the fact that the school wants us to be part of the mission and the community. And so for me, I've been involved in youth ministry and campus ministry pretty much since I was a youth. Since college, I would work with the high school students, and then once I was out of college, I worked with college students, and then once I finished college, I was working with high school and college students. That's kind of where my career led me. So I already had that love for campus ministry, youth ministry, being involved in the community. And I remember specifically sitting in Mr. Post's office and sitting in Father Pesci's office during the interview. And, Mr. Hunter, the head of the science department, he grilled me on my knowledge of biology. And he was the one that asked me about my classroom procedures and how I managed a class, what are my discipline, how do I manage discipline. So he grilled me on that aspect of the academics. And Father Pesci and Mr. Post, they were asking me things about how are you involved in the community? What do you do to be a part of the whole school experience outside of academics? And how do you contribute? And so that's what I think is so amazing about a place like Loyola Blakefield is that we really are welcome and encouraged. And the administration wants us to not only be warm bodies completing a job, they want us to be a part of the community. And they want us to be here for the academics, they want us to be here for the athletics, the Christian service, the campus ministry aspects. And thankfully, I've been welcomed in all aspects of that. I coached girls volleyball for 6 years, and it's one of the things I love about my job is coaching volleyball. I've always loved it. And so when I was hired here, and Mr. Post said, Coach Bear could probably use an assistant, I signed right on. And it wasn't until I started telling people that I was going to coach men's volleyball that people kind of looked at me like, well, you're going to coach men's volleyball? Like, can you coach men's volleyball? And I started thinking about it. I was like, well, of course I can coach men's volleyball. How hard can it be? So I remember the very first practice when I walked in my shorts and t-shirt and my hair pulled back, and I probably looked like I'm 15 in that situation. And I walk into the gym, and there are all these boys that have never seen me before and really don't know what to do with me. Like, they don't really know if they should listen to me, if I'm going to be serious. And I give a lot of credit to Mr. Bear, Coach Bear, who from day one showed me the utmost respect and really made sure the boys knew that I was somebody who knew a lot about volleyball and had a lot to add. And I remember the very first game, all the parents that came up and introduced themselves to me and said, "We're so glad to have you as part of the team." Mr. Bear said in one of the first practices that it was no longer a boys' club, that they're letting the ladies in. So I don't know how the boys felt about that, but they certainly welcomed me. And I think the biggest compliment I received at the end of the season, when we had our end of the season party, one of the juniors said, "Coach Schuller, you're coming back next year, right?" And I said, "Well, yes, unless you know something I know." So he said, it just wouldn't be the same without you now. So that was a huge compliment that they felt that I added something to the team, that I wasn't just another assistant coach that had nothing to say, or just someone they hired because they felt like it would be a good thing to do. I've also been able to be part of the service program. I went on a Philly service trip last year, and I distinctly remember the day before thinking, what am I going to do with 10 boys that I don't know in a city that I don't know, trying to be the adults, and how's this going to work? Are they going to listen to me? Is it going to be difficult? Or it's going to be a difficult situation and setting? And it was wonderful. It was absolutely wonderful. The boys do an amazing job on those service trips, and it's such a great opportunity to get to know them one-on-one. Beside the service trip, I was also invited to be part of Kairos last year. And again, I remember showing up and sitting at this table with these boys and thinking, what are they going to say to me? I mean, they're not going to want to talk to a girl about, their life. So I was apprehensive, and I kept thinking, well, hopefully the leader will lead them, and we'll have some good discussions. And I think our group went till like 4 in the morning, and they just wouldn't shut up, really. So they never, I don't think the boys look at any of us and think, ooh, you're female, and that's a male, and there's a distinction. Obviously there is, but I don't think they treat us any differently or view us as a different entity in the school. We're all collectively a part of the Loyola Blakefield community, which is a wonderful thing. I was certainly wondering how that was going to work. I taught in a co-ed situation before this, and I didn't know what it was going to be like to teach all boys, and were they going to treat me differently, and how was it going to be different than teaching a co-ed. I don't know if I can go back to co-ed now. I think the boys have me hooked. So that's, reiterating what everyone up here has said. This is a community. It's not just a job. It's not just a place that you come to because, you punch your time card and you do your job and you go home and then you do it the next day. You come in here and I know I'm excited. I've never been a part of it. I've never had a job where, I don't wake up in the morning and dread it, even though it's 5:30 and I don't feel like getting out of bed, but I don't certainly dread getting up and going to work. And once I get here, I walk down the hallways and the boys greet me and the faculty greets me, and I know it's going to be a great day. And then, the boys do silly things every day that make me laugh, and I realize, wow, there's no place on earth that you have this kind of entertainment. And that's I would say that's probably reiterates a lot of what the faculty, whether they were women or men, it's certainly more than a job. It's a place that we come to because we enjoy coming here. We enjoy being a part of the retreats and campus ministry. We enjoy being a part of the lives of boys outside in athletics and coaching. I think you've probably heard it several times now that it's certainly a great community to be a part of. It's certainly not just a school, and it's certainly not just a job. It's a whole community, and whether or not the women are impacting that, or what the role of women have had, I'm certain that through our experiences we've had a role. But I guess time will tell what role that takes in the future. So for now, what we'd like to do is kind of open this up for a discussion. We've shared some of our experiences, and as parents and faculty who have been here for many, many years, we're pretty confident that you have your own experiences of women at Loyola Blakefield and how they impact the students, the faculty, what role they've had. So we'd really like to open it up for discussion, and hopefully you'll have some great observations to share. So right now, we'd love for you to offer your observations. How have you seen the role of women on campus, and have you seen a change, and what do you remember about women on campus?
Do you think your sons are aware the male-female thing, or do they just see instructors?
Whether they like it or they don't like it, doesn't matter.
Equal opportunity.
So I don't think that he's really got to get
There was a math teacher that it's math. Yes, it's math.
Mr. Reed?
I'm sorry, I would just suggest maybe using the microphone now, because back here it's a little hard to hear responses, and it might be good if we heard everybody, unless there's something you don't want to be heard. You hold the microphone
Not
back.
really, no one's going to talk.
It might help. This might help. Suggestion.
One observation I have is certainly it's been nice to have Mrs. Brune here. She certainly is a mom away from home for my sons, and it's nice to be able to call in and know that she knows who I am, and I know she'll take care of my son. And my own son got car sick every morning probably, and there were frequent mornings when she'd call me at work saying, "Who's it was wonderful to know that, and I'm sure Mr. Stewart's nurturing too, but I know Mrs.
Just telling us.
Yes, he's so much keep an eye on my son until I got there. And even though when my older son was here, there was a male nurse, and I never really got to know him, but it certainly is nice having a female nurse. Again, I think when the boys are sick, when anyone's sick, you want that sort of nurturing person. And I know men can be nurturing, but it certainly is nice to have a female nurse. And I always know that she was wonderful, keeping an eye on my son as well. So I appreciate that.
You don't know that I was a nurse for many years without a license. And no kids ever got sick.
We didn't dare, right?
We were nurses for a
nobody got sick.
Well, they only have one female John here for the longest while. I hope they have underneath the step.
That's true. Actually, I remember that. That you had to go downstairs, and then, you know, there weren't women's rooms, no.
Kathy, most people probably know you're the daughter of a preacher man. Did you ever feel uncomfortable being required to go to the liturgies and
Not at all.
getting in any embarrassing situations?
No, I love the Jesuits because I really have always been made to feel very comfortable. My father is a now retired UCC minister, and you know, it's a very different thing, but that's the thing that's so unusual. I mean, I'm not Catholic, and I came here. This is actually funny. I came in August, and I would eat in the dining room, and no one was here, but I started in August, and so there were a few people milling around. I met a few people, and I would eat in the dining room in Xavier, and I almost died the first day of school. I realized the guy I'm eating lunch with who had worn cut-off shorts and a t-shirt had a collar. I was like, oh my God, he's a priest. I didn't know he was a priest, you know, because I just didn't know. So, you know, I should have been really uncomfortable, but I was always made to feel uncomfortable. I was always invited to be a part of things, particularly in smaller groups. You know, I was never made to feel, I was always invited. I was never told, you have to stay here, you can't participate. And, you know, we have students who are not Catholic here, but I don't think that they are ever made and often encouraged to be a part of things. And I'll never forget being on Cairo. I was a Muslim student. It was amazing. So, you know, I think that my New England family and friends were sort of like, what's it like, you know, being in that kind, you know, and it just wasn't that way. And in some ways, I just think, we were talking about this earlier, I do think the emergence of in the last 5 to 10 years of the Ignatian embracing of people to be so much a part of the community, and I think that if anything, there is this embracing of everybody for whatever they bring to the community. And so I know that sometimes people would look at me if I didn't go up for communion or whatever. And I had some funny conversations on Kairos. The guys say, well, we'd like to be Protestant until we get married. Then we want to be Catholic. And I'm going, okay, now what does that mean? You know, dear, you're saying, what do you think the Protestant preachers are telling you to do or not do? You know, but no, again, I don't think I would be here and be as happy if I had been made to feel separate. And that's a big stretch, you know. Coming in 1985, I was 23. I was fresh out of, you know, just newly married. Everyone made me feel very comfortable.
Sheila, did you talk about your bank and whether you need a bailout?
After today, I do need a bailout. All my money went to seniors who forgot their $10 deposit for the tuxedo. That's graduation time.
So that's
Lends a lot of money out. She never gets
But
it
it is, I
back.
got that bank, and I give it to kids for lunch, you know, when they forget their lunch money, or, you know, they need to drink after school. And then it takes me sometimes 2 weeks to track them down.
And she sends me out
get it
again.
back. But today, that was funny. The first one came in like 9 o'clock this morning, said, can I borrow $10? And at that point, the guy had gone to the bank to get ones for me. When I had like $40, you know, enough bills, I give it, and he gets me ones because the kids usually need change. And so he came, and then 20 minutes later, somebody else came, and then the guy came back with the bank, and the money was gone. So I'll get it back tomorrow. But they do need money all the time.
I'm the one who sat on the side. I'm Scott Moore. I'm a Jesuit scholastic here. And that means I'm in formation for priesthood. And one of the things that I noticed about just thinking about, I work with the liturgies and I teach math and I also teach religion. I work with Beth Schuller with liturgies. This is working, is it working? And Beth and I talk often about planning for the liturgies, and one of the things I think that brings a lot of value to the liturgies is having women participate. And Sheila talked about being a Eucharistic minister, and several included here served as Eucharistic ministers. And often in our liturgies, as Sheila said, she offered reflection during our Immaculate Conception service. And I say all this because I think many of the women, the mothers of the students here, teach their sons how to pray. And I think that's very valuable. They know the value of having women teach them how to pray, either their grandmothers or their mothers. And I think having women participate in our liturgies is very important because it has the students remember their origins of prayer and their spirituality and their relationship with God. Often, it comes with that nurturing of with their mothers. So that's just kind of one observation I had, and I'd just like to say it's a privilege to be able to work with the liturgies and with that.
We actually commented on this in my department recently, that the liturgies, the work that Beth Ann and Scott have done are terrific. I mean, these kids, they're involving the kids. The kids are taking ownership over it and speaking and participating. And whenever they're involved, it's obviously more meaningful for them. So what they're doing in this last year has been wonderful.
They've done a great job.
I guess with the boys, one way to all understand ourselves is knowing that the people that are there and somehow, by some kind of magic, develop a better self-understanding. And how do you sense the boys are learning how to be boys and because of their interactions with boys?
Yes.
I'm curious to see, like, even small little nuances about how you see different attitudes or postures that reflect something that might be a result of your time.
We end up with a bully pulpit. So we have often got that teachable moment with the boys, and issues arise, and you have a really unique opportunity to get the message across. How do you show respect? Just genuine, mutual respect. It's very difficult. It's no secret that our culture makes it tough. Being at an all-boys school makes the interaction difficult. When all they do with one another typically is find themselves together in social situations. The price you pay for a single-sex education is you lose a lot of the opportunity for being work partners, just being friends. And what they get to see, I think, is us being friends with our male co-workers and how we have that kind of a relationship. You can be friends, you can joke around, but there is that level of respect. And I think there are so many subtle ways that you don't have to hammer them over the head when they've made a faux pas, but if you've got a sense of humor and you can just kind of tweak it and let them know where they should be on this, and it's done in a friendly way. And I do think that we have a wonderful opportunity to make a difference.
And you do call them on it when they cross the line, and that's. I mean, I really feel like that's, but you can do it in a respectful, but firm way, and they always respond. One of the things that I thought of is in freshman guidance class, the peer educators come in, and one of their favorite lessons that we've been doing for years is the sexual stereotyping lesson. I don't know if your sons have ever talked about it, but basically the peer educators, who are 3 students, go and talk to the boys, and they encourage them to talk about language or words that they use that are sexual stereotypes for women, and they kind of egg them on and encourage them to come on, and then by plan, I walk in the room and they die. I mean, they just die. And to this day, I'll have a senior come up to me and say, I remember when you came in. I don't remember them. I don't even know who's in the room. But then I come in and I act surprised. But then we process what just happened. Were you having fun before? How come you're not having fun now? Well, the respect me enough to be embarrassed by this. And we use the lesson to help them understand that, you know, who's being hurt by this if no one knows. And so we go through the whole thing. But to this day, the peer educators all wait to see which lessons they get because they all want that one. And in the past, we've had Aaron Warfield come in. Did you did one more? Fran, you have, right? And you know, you have to kind of be careful with it because it can get out of hand. But it does make a point. And when I'm on peer education retreats, sometimes I think, oh no, here we go. I have to act. I have to give them the spiel about women if they're talking and they're not making the right, you know, they're making a statement that they might want to rethink. And sometimes you think, oh, here we go. But then again, it's really important. I feel like that's one of the things we really need to do for them because they don't have girls in their classroom saying, hey, wait a minute, you can't say that. So I feel very responsible that that's something that I need to do so that, you know, because they don't get killed when they go to college and they work with girls and they say the wrong thing.
I think as women, you do a lot of teaching just by example. You know, you are who you are, you live what you believe every day, and they pick up on that. They do. And I think they're very open to what you have to say, and I'm very open to what they have to say. I like to listen to them. And sometimes they come in just to ask some silly little thing, but they want an answer, and if you respond respecting them, they in turn, you know, will respect you. I can truthfully say I can count on probably 2 fingers the time that I've really felt that someone was disrespectful to me. And they really are, when they're called on it, they're very quick to apologize.
I just want to share a little experience I had which kind of demonstrates the respect that these boys have. I arrived here at school one afternoon. It was about 3:30 in the afternoon to watch a basketball game. And so being 3:30, there were still a lot of boys milling around and waiting for rides and so forth. So I parked my car and I started up the steps in Knott Hall and I tripped over my own feet, kind of stumbled up the steps. And the boys just, you know, a couple of them you could see were really trying to hold in a little snicker, but they didn't laugh and they came running to me. And a couple of them just had the most sincere, earnest, caring looks in their eye. Help me up, are you all right, ma'am? I was fine, of course, but it was so impressive. So somebody's having, you know, a really positive influence on them, and I'm sure it's at least impartation on there.
We have a lot of college representatives in the fall that come to campus to meet with the seniors, and every year, multiple times, I am told by the reps that come on campus, your students are so polite because the minute there's someone on campus kind of looking around, they say 2 and 3 and 4 people will come, can I help you? Do you need to know where to go? You know, and I do think that's all of us. That's the men and the women on this campus that really emphasize it. But yeah, I agree. Our guys are wonderful that way.
This taps into a favorite story. It's not so much a gender story, but it's the next step up on this. 1 or 2 years ago, there was a soda delivery man that had a stack of sodas on a dolly. It was trays and trays and trays. And I don't remember exactly what happened, but the whole thing went over. And they were rolling everywhere. And it was at that same congregation of kids waiting for rides. And what did your sons do? They helped him pick up the sodas and put them back in. And he couldn't get over that.
He thought they were going to run over.
And he just figured it was fair. Of course the kids are going to grab the sodas and run. And these kids all came, grabbed the sodas, and put them in his tray. He came in that day. He was speechless. He couldn't believe it. But there wasn't even a question.
I think part of that is because we treat these boys like our own children.
Right.
Have the same expectation of their behavior, of what lessons we want them to learn. And I think society has changed a little bit in that we are allowed to nurture and not look at it like it's not professional or career. Some of us are naturally good nurturers, like Sheila definitely is. And that is a good thing for everyone. We do expect them to behave as their own children.
One more thing too, sorry, but we have such high expectations of boys and their behavior, and when you set the bar my students to Mr. Stewart because I felt that they were out of line and they were being disrespectful. And I think it's a true testament. The handbook doesn't have a litany of rules like you will not do this and you will not do this and you should not act this way. It's expected. The boys know that there is a level of behavior that is, you're a gentleman and you should act like a gentleman at all times. I don't think there's, I've never experienced kind of a difference in male, female, maybe a little bit. I mean, they hold the doors and they're really proud of themselves when they open the door. You're behind them and, oh, you can go through the door first. And that's what the gentleman does. And that's great. I mean, that's a great example of how we have such high expectations for our students and they certainly meet those and for the most part exceed them wonderfully.
As a parent, when they used to grow up, certainly late deadlines, like Roeder, one of mine out, late on college things, or Fran had one of mine in Murray. They really would not survive here without knowing that they had these women they could call back. And Sheila's mother of 1,000 every day, and they know something. I just feel good knowing that they know that they're women that they can count on, and they can go to, because they are intimidated sometimes, especially in middle school, by some of the men on campus. And it's just nice to know that if there's a problem, they feel really good about going to some of these women and asking for advice, or even just getting a pat on the back. I know, like I said, my friend is a freshman in college campus, and I was so I appreciate that. You got mothers at home and here. So.
But I want to echo what Stan said. I mean, as Randall knows, I heard it was, I'm surprised it's not attached to so right now. It's just hang on. But I sent her an email last week that just said, can you keep the mother's eye on us? And to be able to just have someone and see events which are so good for our boys. Such a great place to be. I always felt like when my boys started here, the men here got that some stuff boys just do and you just don't freak out about it. You just laugh and you move on, and then when they get to a certain point, it's dealt with and it's over in a way that men deal with things. And women, I should say I, so I think the men here are such an important part of the boys learning to be boys and men, as you suggested. But having women as a part of that alchemy and a maternal figure that, as a mother, you can look to, and as the boys can look to, I think it's an important part of learning to rely on other women in their lives besides their mother. I want my sons to one day rely on their wives for comfort and for guidance and for support. And sometimes you need other women in your lives besides your mother to make that seem okay. And I think that's an important part of the opportunity to all the lives. So this is how grateful our mother's hearts are for all of them.
If I may, just a couple of thoughts. As someone who came here, as I think Father Joe Mancini did, John Stewart, some others, here at Loyola when there were almost all men. And all those men happened to be Jesuits, by and large. And I think back then, certainly in the early 60s, as a student, and Mr. Stewart, John, Father, please chime in if you'd like, there really wasn't much of an articulation of what the school was about in terms of this sense of community. I think there was, it was very present, it was very real because of the way the men acted toward us. It was just a given because I think they were very much in tune with what seems to me to be very special about Jesuit education. The Jesuits truly believe that they are involved in ministry. They somehow are doing God's work. And therefore, they've always been known to be very passionate about what they do, wanting, in our case, young men to achieve all that we can do, have high expectations, all the kinds of things that I think are still alive today in a very different context. And I think as in the 70s, when I came back as a student, as a teacher rather, and the decline in the number of men going into the society became very clear, I think the Jesuits, to their credit, rather than becoming very, if you will, passive, aggressive, and turning inward, in my experience here, by and large, were just the opposite. Were very engaging, wanted us to become a true part of what it was that they had. And that really began this sense of articulating what it was that was special. And in all due respect to the men who were here, and I think it's a real tribute to people like Father Pesh, Father Swope on our board, Father Joe Mancini who talks about this, Father George who hired me, Mr. George, but who by his example showed me that working here was much more about what was happening in the classroom and more than about your subject matter. A real desire on the part of the Society of Jesus, the men who've been here, to share this charism. And I think Loyola has been very fortunate because my sense is that in some of the other Jesuit institutions, some of the Jesuits have not been as open, shall we say, to that because of a number of reasons. So again, in my sense, John, I don't know whether you would, put you on the spot or Joe, but I think by and large, the Jesuits who have been here over the years have seen the changes that have had to occur if the school was to stay the kind of school that we are. So fortunately, we've had a good group of men who were Jesuits.
The interesting thing was when your office was developed and funded, that was such a huge statement as to the priority of sharing what the mission is. And I thought it was a very forward-thinking, and it was expansive, it was generous. It wasn't this, we have a good thing, and it's, you're out there and we're in here. You could sense and feel the generosity, but by funding the office of Ignatian Spirituality, that's the physical representation of the commitment to that. And then you've heard the speakers talk about the change just happened to take place 5 years ago when this office was established. I think sometimes the influence of your office, I don't want to say it's not recognized, but there's not the official format to give it credit and recognize it for what it has done, I think, in this community clearly. And I appreciate the generosity that it took to make that kind of a commitment because I think I've been the beneficiary of it. I think it's interesting. We didn't talk about that before tonight, but that came up in a lot of these conversations.
That's what I was going to say. When we started talking about this, it was really kind of interesting. We're sitting around the table and we're looking at the different years that we've been here, and we all talked about how it started to change. When we were encouraged to go on Kairos, we were encouraged to do service trips. We're being encouraged to take on that mission, and truly, that's what we came out of that's why we thought it was interesting. We were thinking it was going to be a talk about, okay, what my experience, but actually it turns out it made us realize that I think our enriched role at Blakefield, the women at Blakefield, was a big part of the response. The reason for that is because we've been encouraged to do so by.
It's been very dynamic, and I think it's continuing that way. And I think, Scott, with what you're doing with the liturgies, you're taking it to the kids, and that's the next outreach to this. And I think they're catching some of that enthusiasm, and I feel it. I see it.
And that's why it works. And that's.
But you've just shown us why you're worthy of that trust to start with. And I think, I don't think anybody surrenders that trust easily, but I think we surrender it wisely.
So I'd like to have a final word of solution question. Great things to propose.
I have a conversation. I sent my boys to the school because it is men-run, because it is male-dominated. There are mostly male teachers. it was really important to me that they come here for that reason. And which is not to denigrate anything, but when you give to the education, because women are great educators, they're great mentors to me. I think they enhance the experience totally because they do provide a totally different perspective. But at the same time, I would be concerned that it not become an institution that is most like other educational institutions, public and elementary schools, totally different. Because for me, the male environment is a really good thing for kids. I do think it's a great thing to have a same-sex education. I have same-sex education when they're not prep. And he gave me as a young woman and my brothers as young men and all the opportunity to be themselves, to not worry about other sex things, but at the same time to have, we had a couple of male teachers and they gave us as females a different outlook and a different thing, and our education experience. You're talking about the schools in the future and it is a collaboration, but I would never want personally to largely female. And my hope would be that, and I pray that down the road there are still lots of men willing to teach these things because it makes a big difference in young man's life to have a male in the teaching. And I do appreciate it when you do. We're not trying to take it Kathy, you guys, has set an example from my experience with my daughter and her friends and guidance counselor there, and my conversations with other people in development who have put into this college counseling program. You know I have patients that have had problems, and I think we each have our own personal time. You have set an example for other college counseling programs in other schools. Because when I was there now, it was look at Loyola's website, look what Loyola does, that's where you're going to get your job, you're not going to get it. Okay? Thank you. You've done good things. It's really good job.
Before bringing things to a close, I'd just like to pick up on the sense of Mr. Stewart. I'm sure.
Hey, Mr. Wingcase, ask the ladies up there.
Well, I can tell you from a number of past experiences being with him for 40 years now, particularly in your role of late, that whenever you notice Mr. Stewart, even to this day, Wednesday afternoon, Thursday, a little darker around the face, he's not shaving. And the reason he does that is that on Fridays he usually has plans to nurture some of the boys because they've been doing some things that perhaps they shouldn't be doing. And he likes that one-on-one closeness with me. So, no, I was thinking that nurturing. I think your point's very good, and it's one that I think Loyola will continue to attract very good people. One more quick story about Mr. Stewart and Mrs. Brune, and then I'll talk about the last week. But last week, Mrs. Brune was away for several days, as some of you know, and it was funny to see Mr. Stewart there at the front desk, looking a little more hairy than usual. We had a staff meeting for Mr. Day around the school, so about 8 of us meet periodically. Kathy was there, and we were waiting for Mr. Stewart to come up, and realized someone said he is really busy. She wasn't. Then we started to chuckle. And then somebody had the great thought of calling Mrs. Kajala, because we had heard there was some sickness, we're going to have her send up with a whole 7th grade class. And asked to tell Mr. Stewart that they were ill because the nurse wasn't here. We were going to go down and watch and see how they reacted. We chickened down. It wasn't one of the things I wish we had done that now. Father Pesci alluded to the fact that our next presentation is going to be looking somewhat in the future. We're going to make some adjustments to our plans to just to quickly let you folks know what we're doing. Instead of the presentation in April on 40 years of collaboration, we're going to sort of fold that notion into our last evening, which will be in with an eye to looking at, okay,